Well, good afternoon, everybody. Oh, I heard like one good afternoon. Thank you, David. I know y'all are chatting and you're eating a little. My name is Stephanie Ford. I'm the creative director here, and on behalf of our staff here at North Star, I just want to welcome you to Lunch with a Leader. It is hard to believe it is almost the end of October. I know, at least in our school systems over the last week, it has been crazy with homecomings and all those kinds of festivities. We had some of that in my own house. My very introverted son somehow made homecoming court, and we got to do all of the big homecoming festivities this last weekend. We're celebrating the Braves here. We continue to be very excited about that. And Mike's going to be coming up in a minute. As you guys are enjoying your lunch, help me thank Andy and Brenda, their Chick-fil-A team. They do an awesome job for us. I don't know if we have any people, if it's your first time here for Lunch with a Leader. So if you're not new, this is going to just sound like what we say every time. But it was our desire to create this event to be a way that you could come and meet with like-minded leaders, not only in your similar profession, but across the spectrum, just so we could grow together in ways that maybe you couldn't get somewhere else, and that we take these spiritual leadership principles that we're learning here and we figure out how to apply them in our churches, in our schools, in our offices, and maybe sometimes even in our homes. And so we hope today that when you leave here, you're a little bit better than when you got here. And so Mike's going to be coming in just a minute. Today we're going to be talking about what it looks like when you face an impossible situation. I'm sure Mike will ask this, but show of quick hands. How many of you just this week, it's this Monday, how many of you have already faced an impossible situation? Yeah. So very timely today. So go ahead and continue eating and take your notes out in just a minute. Thank you again for being here. Mike's on his way up.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. If I've never met you before, my name is Mike, and it's an honor to welcome you here to North Star. We love having you here, and I speak on behalf of our North Star team. This is something we look forward to every month, having you guys in this room, because you really are the people that are out in our community making a difference. So I hope during your table talk time, which you'll get today, you'll get a chance to introduce yourself to the people at the tables if you haven't already, because I'm going to give you some time to talk back and forth. So Stephanie already hit it. The Braves, Saturday night. Great night. So impossible. If I had told you in June that the Braves were going to win the National League, everybody in this room said it would be what? Impossible. There's no way. And they did it. They somehow pulled it out. It was a great day. So the funny part of the story is my daughter got married Saturday, but the funny part of the story was she would tell you her whole life has revolved around the game of baseball. I mean, this is all the time. Y'all are always, it's Casey's baseball tournament and you going to this baseball function. Surely when Casey graduates high school, we won't be working our lives around baseball. And then we started coaching, and then we still do baseball. And then it was her wedding day and the Braves won the National League. All right, so it just worked out great. And her husband 6 months ago had booked a room at the Omni overlooking the Battery and the field. So guess what, baby? Baseball's part of it. You just got to live. You got to live it. So how about a round of applause for the Bravos? They got a big week ahead of them. But when you think about the word impossible, give me some things that come to your mind. If I were to say, and Stephanie asked you, what seems impossible? Give me what impossible means to you. When you hear the word impossible, what's it make you think of? Braves tickets. All right, they're very good, Scott. Braves tickets. What else does it make you think of? The word impossible.
Georgia Tech winning the national championship in football.
Oh, Georgia Tech win the national championship. Okay, this is getting personal. All right, Georgia Tech win the national championship in football. What do you think of when you hear the word impossible? Great, Chief Flynn. It cannot work within the paradigms that we know and we have set. What else do you think of with impossible? What else do you think of when you hear the word impossible? Say that again. Managing autism. Very good. It seems impossible. So in our lives, you are going to be confronted with impossible situations. If you take your mind back to childhood and you see things as a child, there were things you faced as a child that when you lived them, you thought, well, it's impossible. I'll never be able to do that. Then you move up to high school, then you move up to college, then you move up in your 20s and your 30s and your 40s and your 50s and all the ranges of life. At every season of life, you will confront an impossible situation. It's just part of it. And they come dressed differently, they act differently. Those impossible things, you can't even relate it to the last impossible thing, but yet when you face it, it looks impossible. And when something looks impossible, you have a choice. What am I going to do with it? When those impossible situations come, you have an opportunity. Do I walk up to it and figure it out, or do I move away from it? The story we get today, it's a great story, but the power of the story isn't just the present tense of the story that we read in Joshua. So they've overcome a lot. They've wandered in the wilderness for 40 years, which we're going to hit in a second. Joshua leads them across the Jordan River, which was impossible. The river was at flood stage, which means it's overflowing. It's not like they walked across the water and they're like, well, this is a big rapid. Literally, it could drown them, but the water stops up. They get across. God's taking care of them. And now we enter this story. I want you to read with me. Joshua, we're in Acts on Sundays. Joshua chapter 6, verse 1. It's right there in your notes. So on your table are notes and pens. I hope you will take notes today and keep up. Now Jericho, which was the big city, was shut up inside and outside because of the people of Israel. So they had heard about the people that had crossed the river, and the people on the inside of the walls were scared. And the Lord said to Joshua, see, I've given Jericho into your hand with its king and its mighty men of valor. You shall march around the city, all the men of war going around the city once. Thus shall you do for 6 days. 7 priests shall hear 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the ark, and on the 7th day you shall march around the city 7 times, and the priests shall blow the trumpet. So God told Joshua, listen, Joshua, we got a plan. Here's how you're going to do it. You're going to march around the city once, and then you're going to take your men and you're going to march around the city multiple times. And when they make a long blast with a ram's horn, when you hear the sound of the trumpet, then all the people shall shout with a great shout, and the wall of the city will fall down flat, and the people shall go up, everyone straight before him. So Joshua, son of Nun, called the priests and said, take up the ark of the covenant, let 7 priests bear 7 trumpets before the ark of the Lord. And he said to the people, go forward, march around the city, and let the armed men pass before the ark of the Lord. And just as he had commanded, the priests bearing the 7 trumpets, the ram's horns, before the Lord went forward, blowing the trumpets with the ark of the covenant of the Lord following them. The armed men were walking before the priests, were blowing the trumpets, and the rear guard was walking after the ark while the trumpets blew continually. But Joshua commanded the people, you shall not shout or make your voice heard, neither shall any word go out of your mouth until the day I tell you to shout, then you shall shout. So he caused the ark of the Lord to circle the city, going about it once. And they came in the camp, spent the night, rose early the next morning, took up the ark, the 7 priests bearing the 7 trumpets of the rams before the ark of the Lord, marched on. They blew the trumpets continually, and the armed men were walking before them, and the rear guard was walking around after the ark of the Lord, while the trumpets blew continually. And the second day they marched around the city once and returned to the camp. So they did this for how many days? What does it say? Okay, if you're some of the people, how many of you are going, I think Joshua has lost his mind, right? I mean, you're going, I think something's wrong. We're just marching. We're not marching on, we're marching around. But on the 7th day, they rose early as the dawn of the day, They marched around the city in the same manner for 7 times. It was only on that day they marched around the city 7 times. And at the 7th time, when the priests had blown the trumpets, Joshua said to the people, "Shout, for the Lord has given you the city." So the people shouted, and the trumpets were blown. And as soon as the people heard the sound of the trumpet, the people shouted a great shout, and the wall fell down flat, so that the people went in the city, every man straight before him, and they captured the city. That is a long story to tell you a great point. If you were to have gone to the people that were doing the marching, they would have told you, "We can't do this." All right, I want you to write down a little thought, ready in your outline. And the thought would say, the word impossible and "we can't" always go together. The word impossible and the phrase "we can't," those always go together. When something looks impossible, the quickest exit out is to say, "Well, we can't do that. That's not possible. We can't." And then a list of reasons of why we can't. Today, you have a wall in front of you. That wall may look like autism. That wall may look like something at your company. That wall may look like something in your city. That wall may look like, if you're in the FCA world, a fundraising goal. That wall may look like something at your school. There is a wall in front of all of us. It could be in our marriage. It could be in our home. It could be with our kids. It could be with our job. But you've got your walls, and I'm going to tell you, you're going to get more. So today we're going to talk about what to do with those. So would you pray with me right where you are? Would you just ask the Lord to show you what you need today? Man, you carved out time to get out of here in the middle of a work day. Would you just ask the Lord to give you what you need today? Father, I don't know how these leaders walked in this room. I don't know their backgrounds. I don't know their stories. I don't know the stuff of life that they've got packed in their carry-on, that they're walking in with. But God, today I pray that we would see what you see, not just what our eyes see. And Father, that is my prayer, and I pray it in Jesus' name. Amen. So let me set up this story of why this day was so big. There was a whole generation. So God told Moses, "I'm going to give you the promised land." Moses chooses 12 spies. Chooses 12 spies. And their job was to go and see if they could take what God had already told them they could have. So they did it. They went. 10 of the spies came back and said, "We can't. There's giants in the land, and we look like grasshoppers in their sight." Now, time out. They did not talk to anybody to find out if they look like grasshoppers, okay? But they felt like in their minds, we're nobodies, they're somebodies, we can't do this. 2 guys said they could. 2 guys, Joshua, Caleb, said we can do this. The 10 others said we can't. Moses went with the 10, not with the 2. And they walked in the wilderness for 40 years. 40 years. 40 years they walked in the wilderness. Most likely, most scholars think that when they went into the land, what they saw was something akin to the walls of Jericho. Built into the people, that generation died off. These are the kids of those parents and grandparents. They see the walls of Jericho, and what do you think goes through their mind? Oh my gosh, God brought us this far, but I don't think we can. I don't think we can. So right there in your notes, it was the sight of the cities like Jericho that convinced 10 of the Jewish spies that Israel could never conquer the land. It looked impossible. It looked impossible. You wonder what great things never happened because of a wall somebody thought they couldn't get through. What great story was never written because somebody saw something in front of them that looked impossible. And they said, you know what? I'll choose 40 years of wandering in the wilderness over trying to do something that seems impossible. So you sit in this room today, and this is all about, sort of a little background, this is all about not leadership. We can go get leadership a lot of places. This is about spiritual leadership. It's taking God's ideas and putting them in our lives. Spiritual leaders look at things with a different lens than most people do. So what do spiritual leaders believe about impossible situations? Number one, they believe that nothing is impossible with God. When you factor God in the story, it changes things. When God is the missing piece of your story, it's funny, if you went back to the children of Israel that went in those years prior, they had gotten out of slavery and captivity, but yet they saw something and they deemed it impossible. Isn't it funny how that thinking can almost be bred in us by the generation before? You know, if you had parents, so my parents were of the Depression generation. So my dad was born in 33, my mom was born in 37. So when there was a sale on Diet Cokes at the grocery store, there were 24 packs of 12 packs of Diet Coke. Why? Because from the Depression generation, they may never be on sale again. And the world we're living in a time where we're actually running out of Diet Coke. But anyway, but they would save up. That's what they did. And they did not take risk. They did not like risk. You worked at the same job, you did the same thing because it was steady and even. And I remember when I told them we were coming to plant the church, I remember the look of, well, that is the dumbest idea I've ever heard. Why don't you just go to a church that has insurance and you know that it'll be stable? But I mean, it looks impossible, right? You're gonna start from what? Scratch? Who's going with you? Well, I don't know. Your wife's pregnant. Where are you gonna get insurance? I hadn't thought about that. Well, that's dumb. I sent you to college to think about such things, right? And it seems impossible. And those impossible things can be in our blood. Even as forward-thinking people, we can sit in the leader chair in the morning and go, I don't know how we're gonna get out of this. I don't know what we're gonna do. I don't know if we're gonna make it. I don't know if we got what it takes. I don't know if I've got what it takes. I don't know if we went through a season here at North Star in 2012. It was a really tough season. And I remember, and listen, I'm a person that usually the higher the level of impossibility, the more I like to rise up to it. But I was waning. And my son, who's Casey sitting over here, was off at Liberty. And I remember we had a lot of stuff going on. And I told Ann on a Sunday night, I think I'm going to run up to Lynchburg and see Casey for a couple days. I just need to go see him. He's at Liberty and need to go spend some time with him. And she asked me this question: you going to spend time with Casey, or are you just running from the situation? I was like, well, that's very personal. And I don't appreciate that one bit, but she was right. I was running, right? Because it looked impossible. I didn't imagine how we would ever get through that season. It seemed impossible. There's bad news at every turn, right? Spiritual leaders believe that nothing is impossible with God. So I got a question. Why do we factor God out of stories so quickly? So we believe that on Sunday, right? It sounds right. We'll raise our hand and say amen to it. But on Monday, when the impossible situation comes, it seems very different at the office, or when the checkbooks are out, or when the news comes home from the school. Why do we factor God out of the story so quickly? Somebody raise their hand. Why do we do that? We think we can handle it, and we find out quickly we can't.
We're just engaged with people in the world and the distractions of the world.
We get engaged with people and the distractions of the world. Very good. Why do we factor God out of the story so quick? Easy to forget. Isn't it funny? We've got a short-term memory of God's faithfulness, but a long-term memory of when something didn't turn out right. But a short-term memory. These people had just crossed the river, which was impossible. And now they're facing something impossible. There's no way they can get through it. Why else do we factor God out of our story? Chief.
Because will not always operate on our timeframes.
Sometimes it doesn't happen like we want it to happen.
Lack of trust.
Lack of trust. I just don't, I don't see it. We like for all of life to be sequential. And sometimes there's gaps in the story. We like all of life to match up perfectly. And then sometimes there's a gap and we can't figure out how that gap's gonna get filled. And it looks impossible. Spiritual leaders always factor God in the story. Look at what it says in verse 2. And the Lord said to Joshua, see, I've given Jericho into your hand with its king and its mighty men of valor. Joshua, I got this. You've just got to believe that I've got it. I love what J. Oswald Sanders in his book on spiritual leadership said. He said, the person who sees the difficulties so clearly he does not discern the possibilities cannot inspire a vision in others. Okay, here's the hard part of leadership. How many of you in this room say, at some level, I've got a team that I work with. I may be a team leader, I may be a leader in my home, but I've got people I'm responsible for. Raise your hand if that's you, okay? If we don't think we can, what in the world are they gonna think? If we don't see the possibilities and we see when somebody sees all the impossibilities, it's not inspiring, right? Well, let me tell you why we can't do it. Well, I mean, that didn't make me want to get up and get dressed, right? Here's what I want you to talk about at your tables. We're gonna give you 3 minutes, 30 seconds. What was the biggest emotions you battled? You battle, not even past tense, you battle when you face impossible situations. What are the emotions that come with feeling something's impossible, right? 3 minutes, 30 seconds, you'll talk about it at your tables. Go. All right, let's talk about this real quick. Underlying impossible are emotions, right? So behind that impossible situation, it brings out something in us underlying. What are some emotions you found out at your tables that come out when you face impossible situations? Fear. Who said fear? Fear. What, in what way? Isn't it funny? You fear less when you were responsible for less. The more you're responsible for, the more fear that goes with it, right? The fear of failure. So I did a thing for the city of Kennesaw the other day, and we were talking about blind spots in leadership. It was a fun little exercise we did. And so I was in Beverly, and some other kids got hauled around town right in a 15-passenger van. And the higher up you go, the bigger vehicle you drive of people, which means fear gets more, not less. It's funny. And if you don't fear when you're responsible for people, you're considered reckless, right? But yet that's impossible. That's an impossible. What's another underlying thing of emotion of impossibility? Yes.
We had fear and then we added anger, which causes chaos.
Fear plus anger at what?
Anger that we can't get the situation resolved.
Anger, we can't resolve the situation. And then the chaos is the collateral damage, right? It's and chaos can happen in your organization, right? So think about Joshua. If Joshua went to the wall and said, we can't do it, the people are stuck. That means they're not advancing. It means they're not growing. It means they're going to live basically in a new wilderness. They just changed the address of their wilderness, right? If Joshua doesn't have an answer to this impossible situation. Who else? One more table. Frustration. In what way?
We said a lot of times if you're leaders of organization, you have all the internal knowledge and the people outside the situation that are just like, why can't you fix that? That doesn't seem that hard. But you're not allowed to divulge the information that makes it an impossible situation.
Okay, did y'all hear that? So basically you're frustrated as a leader because the situation other people in the organization are frustrated you're not doing something about it, but they don't know all the information you know and you can't share it, which leads, how many of y'all have felt that emotion? Raise your hand. Yep. I remember when we went through our hard season here, I remember specifically going out to breakfast with one of our staff saying, I don't believe that you have enough vision for us. And I went, you know what my vision is? I want to get you paid next week. That's my vision, which is not very inspiring. But anyway, so that's what I said because I didn't know what to say. we're trying to stay afloat, right? And that's what happens. But here's what spiritual leaders do. They never look at it without factoring God into it. The danger is when we pretend as if God doesn't exist and I have to do it by myself. That's a whole different deal. That's another seminar. I don't have an answer to that one. All I know is when God factors into an impossible situation, it changes the narrative of the story because you've entered somebody who can do something about it. Number two, believe that it takes everybody doing their part. Here's what I love about the story. Joshua does not become a key figure in the story. The people do. Joshua doesn't. It's not Joshua playing the role of Samson from the Old Testament, pushing the walls down. Joshua hears from the Lord, okay, here's how you're going to do it. You and all the people, you're going to go and you're going to go blow trumpets, all the men of war. The priest will blow trumpets. Then all the people will shout with a great shout. And look at the other word we underlined. And everyone straight before. It was a collective effort. I want you to write this down. This is your memory as a leader today. I cannot do this by myself. I can't. So you factor God in the story, it changes things. The other thing you've got to factor in is you're not alone. If you say, Mike, I am living alone as a leader and I don't have anybody to talk to, you will crack. You have got to have somebody outside your world that you can bounce stuff off of. You have to, or you will drown with impossible situations. Because here's the deal, there's more coming. So you get through this one, congratulations, that's awesome. The new one's just gonna look different. Listen, we've lived through a world of it. If we were having this impossible situation and we're having this conversation in October 2019, and I said impossible, we would have named impossible things. What would we not have named as impossible in 2019? Pandemic. How many of y'all before 2019 had never worn a mask in public before? Raise your hand. I didn't own one. I didn't even think about it, right? I didn't know that there would be a day that we wouldn't meet for months. I didn't know that might be an impossible situation. That's what I'm saying. Things come new, but here's the deal. You can't do it alone. I want you to write out this little note beside you. Ready? Beside this point, not beside you, beside the point. All right, here's what I want you to write out. Someone in front of me, and then I'm gonna explain it. Someone beside me, and then someone behind me. So every leader needs someone in front of them. Everybody. We need somebody that's a little further down their story than we are. Second thing we need somebody beside us. A friend that we're running with. That they're the pick your lip up friend, right? That can say things to you. And then we need somebody behind us that we're pouring our experience into. Here's where we get in trouble, is when we don't have anyone in front of us we're learning from, we may get stagnant. If we don't have anybody we're running with, we may get discouraged. And if we don't have anybody coming behind us, it means that I'm not appreciating what the Lord's doing in my life to pass on to somebody else. If I only have people behind me, my ego can drive me because I think I have all these followers that need to hear what I've got to say, that I'm not learning from it. Does that make sense to everybody? So if all I've got are followers and I'm not learning from John Maxwell, if you're the smartest person in the room, every room, you're in the wrong rooms. You can't always be the smartest person in the room. You've got to go places. So I'll give you a for instance. My daughter's getting married this past week. I was at a board meeting in Virginia. I was telling Jamie about it on our staff and met a guy who's been at his church for 37 years. Well, I've been here for 25 years. There's not a lot of people who've been at their church for 25 years. The average tenure of a church is 3 years. 3 years. All right, don't tell North Star that. But anyways, it's 3 years. So they're stuck with me. 25 years I've been here. He's 38. Man, I'm telling you, it's one of the best things I've ever done to talk to him. And he's a dad. He's married off his daughters. And he was able to pour into me something somebody running beside me can't. But then I need the friend running beside me, and then I need the person behind me. And here's the deal. You can't do it on your own. I love this quote. The best teams in the world are those that have the right people in the right places doing the right things. It's true that sometimes you can get things done with certain positions not performing at their best. In the short term, it could work. But to achieve excellence, you need and I want you to underline this next phrase, best players. You need the people. The Braves, we'll go back to the Braves because that's what we do. All right, the Braves in June had 3 outfielders. And when Acuna went down, we had a big problem. What was the difference between the Braves at the end of June, early July, and now? 4 acquisitions actually. Changed the whole scope of the season. Right people, right place. God has sent the people. So there's sometimes as a leader, we have to look at impossible situations and say, Lord, who have you put in our organization that can help us think our way out of this situation, right? So let's go back on a little movie thing here. There was a movie that came out with Tom Hanks a few years ago, and they took a trip to outer space, and they got stuck in outer space. It's called Apollo 13. Do y'all remember the scene? They're in outer space, and they cannot get them home. And you remember in Houston, it was impossible. They could not tell them in outer space, you ain't gonna make it. You remember what they did? They went and they put into a box everything they had on board. And they said, bring it in the room. And they poured it out on the table. And they figured out as a team how to get that craft home. There are times we have to do that with our teams. Number 3, believe that God often works in unconventional ways. We got to believe that God works sometimes, and one of you guys said it earlier, in ways that we don't get. We don't get them. And this is a word, I want you to write out beside that. It's the word trust. We got to trust that God hadn't taken a day off. We got to trust that God still knows our name. We got to trust that maybe his plan doesn't look like it. I love how Isaiah says it, for my thoughts are not your thoughts. My ways are not your ways. As the heavens are higher than earth, so my ways are higher than yours, and my thoughts are higher than your thoughts. Now, we go, man, I wish I thought like the Lord. Do you really want to be as smart as God? If you were as smart as God, he wouldn't be God anymore. I'd really rather he know more than we do. We just got to trust it, right? J. Hudson Taylor, who was a spiritual giant missionary, he said these things: make the best plans we can and hope they succeed. Make your own plans and ask God to bless them, and ask God for his plans, then do what he tells us to do. It's a great picture. So here's what I want you to talk about at your table. Why is it so easy to get discouraged and want to quit when we don't understand how God is working? Because every one of us at some point in a situation has thought about quitting when the impossibility looked too big. Talk about it at your table. Question's going to jump up on your screen. Here we go. You know, it's funny when you face impossible things, it takes tons of courage. But to not face them always comes with discouragement. You can't deny it. I wonder how many stories would be different if courage had replaced discouraged, right? I wonder how the story of the children of Israel would be different if they had determined that Jericho's walls would be too big. We don't have the manpower. You got to think, they are not an army. They are just a group of nomads that have been living in the desert. They are not trained in war. They are not trained in conflict. They are not trained in government. They are not trained they have no ability to defeat the people that are inside those walls. The only thing they had was God said we could, so let's give it a shot. And then he tells them, don't go to fight, just go march around it and then scream really loud and the walls will come down. Well, it doesn't work like that. It doesn't work like that. But somehow they determine we can. Last point number 4. Spiritual believers believe they must keep going even when there's no breakthrough in sight. I found this common trait of great leaders. They have a stick-to-itness that most don't. You just couldn't get them out of the fight. The first failure didn't kill them. I remember hearing a HBO interview with Nick Saban and Bill Belichick, and they talked about how they got fired from the Cleveland Browns. Well, if they had said, well, coach in the NFL's and Pete Carroll fired, how many great stories would be different if people lived in the land of discouragement and they only saw impossible? Great spiritual leaders say, God must be at work. I trust him and I'm going to keep moving. I love what Hebrews says, Hebrews 6:12. Through faith and patience, God's people inherit the promises. So really, impossible things cause fight or flight. Fight or flight. My challenge to you as a spiritual leader, here's the biggest part of the day. You are there where you're at in the organization, in the family that you're in, whatever your impossible situation is living right now. You are there for a reason bigger than you. It's not an accident you're there. It's not an accident you're sitting in that seat with that title as dad, mom, leader, whatever your title may be of your impossible situation. God knew. And either he can or he can't. I trust in the Lord very easily when life's working out good. My trust diminishes sometimes when life gets a little tougher. It's just the way that it is. But why has he put you there for such a time as this? Joshua was the right man at the right hour at the right time. And for whatever reason, we don't have the musings of Joshua. We just have the story. Joshua must have thought, well, what do we got to lose? It's better than wandering in the wilderness. The worst thing's going to happen is we're all going to get killed at this wall for screaming at him, and I don't know what, that's God's fault. He told me to do it. I don't know what your impossible situation is, but here's what I know. As a spiritual leader, God's got you. And he's not going to leave you at the wall alone. Would you pray with me? Father, I circle back to the fall of 2017, thinking about a day like this. In fact, I remember so vividly December putting a little mock run with 20 people, 20 invited people to ask the question, would this work? Do you think people would come to this? Scared to death that it would fail, scared to death that it wouldn't work. But God, maybe, just maybe, Today was designed long ago for a person we didn't even know then, who walked in today needing answers from you because there's no answers coming from anywhere else. But God, in the middle of the story, you didn't give them a card with the solution. But God, what you did today was you reminded them that you're present. And your presence is the game changer. Now, Father, I don't know their name, and I don't know their story. But God, you are the master at giving us what we need right when we need it. So, Father, for that one that walked in this room today with that as part of their story, remind them that you're still in their story. And anytime you're in their story, you are greater than whatever they're facing. So, God, would you encourage these leaders today to be the men, to be the women that you've called them to be for this hour, for this place, and for this season. And as we walk through life in and out of impossible situations, may we never forget we've got you, and you change the game. And it's in Jesus' name that I pray. Amen.
Amen. Will y'all join me in thanking Mike for that time together today? I do hope, as we said at the beginning, that there's some part of today that met you right in a spot where you needed it. Maybe it's a conversation that you had at the table. Maybe it was something that you read, a quote, or something that you heard Mike say. I read down this quote from Charles Swindoll, a great evangelist. Says, "We are all faced with a series of great opportunities, brilliantly disguised as impossible situations." And I hope today that you'll take what we've talked about here and not be maybe quite so overwhelmed, but be motivated to pray more and to trust more and to expect more as you go through your days. We meet again November 15th. That's a little earlier, but because of Thanksgiving, that's our next meeting. So go ahead, mark that down. Invite someone to come with you. If you don't have a church home, we'd love to see you here on Sunday, 9:30 or 11. That's a shameless plug, but I'm on staff here, so hey. And hope that you have a great day. Thanks again for taking time to be with us. You guys have a great day.